Hare Krishna, welcome back to 50 Years in ISKCON. I believe this is part number 30, I think, 29 or 30. And this will be, as I've been doing as we went along, after we go through a few years of discussion, then I reflect on that time and just give some of my thoughts from now, looking back. I don't know, I think it might be a bit boring for some people, but others have told me they like the kind of social commentary that comes out, so I'll do it. And let me first offer my respectful obeisances to all of you. Vanchakopatarubhyascha kripasindhavyevacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ma om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskachade Satarane. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare. So it's been a while. For some reason I just haven't felt like doing this, but in the last couple of talks that I gave, I had spent a lot of I'd spoken a lot about the years that I was involved with various Mayapur committees and teams, about the vision team and strategic planning and master planning and the MCS committee. So most of this work was concerned with community development. And so that's where my head was, the things I was thinking about at that time. So now most of this will just be reflections on, most of this work was, about community development and all the complexities that entails. And at that time we were trying, in small groups, different groups, trying to understand, the physical, social, economic, and spiritual and managerial infrastructure that's required for growing a whole township, really, or any community, really. So being involved in these services and all the discussions that ensued, it made me realize and reflect deeply upon how we are shaping the culture that we live in and future generations will live in as well. And that this manifesting of culture that's just going on, not just in Mayapur, but all throughout our society, that we are creating some kind of Krishna conscious culture, whether we're consciously shaping it or not, it's happening. But by shaping the culture, I'm not just speaking about, the buildings and the projects we're erecting, although, of course, how we do that will create, will impact on the culture and the way that we live. And not even so much about what we wear, what we eat, and all of that, although all of those things shape the culture as well. But the bigger part and the most essential part of the culture is the personal dynamics, the atmosphere that we create. What do people feel in our environment? What is the mood? What is the spirit? What are the primary values? really, what should a Krishna conscious culture look like? Or what do we want it to look like? So in those years of involvement in Mayapur, I just have become more aware of how we're moving into a new era of ISKCON development, in which I think it's very important for us to have a clear concept, a clear goal of the kind of culture we're trying to develop. And I just think it could be considered and talked about more, thus this talk. In earlier talks, I tried to give a sense of the different eras we have passed through so far, from the early ashram days, where we were people of similar demographics, mostly all fully engaged in devotional service without payment, and then gradually growing to become a vast society consisting of every nationality and every age, devotees who've come from poverty, devotees who are super wealthy, devotees with very limited education, devotees who have graduated with PhDs from the most prestigious university. So it is really remarkable to see how much has developed and changed over 50 years. And, I'm realizing more and more now how we are in the process of unfolding something extremely important, something that's actually of historic proportions. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. That we're in the midst of creating the first international Vaishnava society, culture in the history of the world. And this has never happened before. So it is experimental. There is no map to follow on how this is to be done. But we do know that Srila Prabhupada clearly envisioned a society right from the beginning, when there was just a handful of young American boys and girls. There was just, a little group, and yet he established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Not, the Krishna Ashram or the Krishna Institution or the Krishna religion. He saw us becoming an international society, which is quite amazing considering what was there at that time. But with all the functions of any society, but a society where everyone is conscious of Krishna. So that has been unfolding, and it's been evolving and changing significantly over time, and surely it will change in many ways on into the future. But, it would be ideal if we were actually consciously driving it, moving it forward, adjusting, learning from our mistakes. I mean, in many ways we are, but really trying to move forwards to create something that will actually be exemplary and beneficial for the world, generation after generation. But it's hard to drive something if you're not clear where you're going exactly. So this certainly holds us back, because there are so many diverse ideas about what we are trying to manifest. At present, you hear so many views of different directions. How do we manifest Krishna Conscious Society, which is no longer temple / ashram based. And there's just widely varying views about that, and often heated debates. And it depends on, where you live, when you joined, what your realizations are, how old you are, who your leaders are, what your own propensities are, what your economic situation is, what are your spiritual goals. Depending on all of this, each of us may naturally be pulled in different directions. And, there are many devotees that feel we should be getting out of the cities and develop a more simple, sustainable, ecological, exemplary lifestyle, growing our own food. And, there are many who think we should really focus exclusively on establishing varnashram, whatever that means, many different things to different people. Some of it scary. Then there's other devotees that feel we should really be developing our lives outside of institutional influence and just entering into the world as responsible citizens, engaged Vaishnavism, that, we become contributors in all areas of life and we influence society from the inside. And, yet there's many others that really want to keep, temple, ashram lifestyles going strong, seeing that full engagement in preaching work, it's still the primary focus, that book distribution and direct missionary work it's more essential now than ever, because we're supposed to be the Brahmins meant to lead society. And then you have others that feel, well, Krishna consciousness is just not about, building temples and supporting religious activities. We're meant to be an educational institution. We're supposed to be creating training systems for our children, our members, and for the outside world. And then there's others who feel that we are just so out of touch with the world that we need to up our participation, change our language, join in the dialogue with the issues of the day. So many ecological concerns, climate change, and there's just so much going on that we should be part of the conversation, part of the solutions. And then, there are others that think we should just focus, make our careers, in Vedic related areas, using yoga, astrology, Ayurveda, vegetarian, vegan cooking, that we should focus on these things that are attractive in order to, bring the attention of Westerners. And of course, some devotees see that modern life, it's just doomed. It's very soon to destroy itself. And so we need to really distance ourselves and become fully independent, get out of the whole system. And then there are others that just feel that our society, it should just become totally decentralized. And then there's others who feel we should eliminate all Indian ethnic aspects to our presentation, and many more. So these are all ideas floating around the society, which it tends to make it difficult to have a clear focus. Where are we going? And of course, all of the above are valid directions that one could, go in and could or should or are actually being developed at present. And because it's really interesting, when we were studying to come up with the mission statement for Mayapur, we had to look at Prabhupada's statements about all different categories of things. And it was just remarkable to see that Srila Prabhupada's vision, it really encompassed so many elements. I was amazed to really see how broad and how far-reaching Srila Prabhupada's ideas were. But, so, there's many ways. It's not like there's one way, but the problem seems to arise again and again that different devotees get fixated on pushing one way only. And they waste so much time in arguing and fighting about it. We should be doing this, and everybody that's doing the other thing is the wrong thing. And, personally, I just feel like this is just such a trick of Maya, to deviate our attention from just doing what works for us, and just digging in and doing it, So many people talk about it. I've heard so much talk about Varnashram and talk about, many things. And it's just a lot of talk. If you manifest something, do it, then people can see, But perhaps it's, it's also difficult because it's not so much, the GBC and leaders who are pointing the way and everyone's following, as in the early days, it was like that. Now it's more up to the individual to try to figure out where to place their energy and find their tribe, work with people that they resonate with. Or, there are gurus and their disciples who have their own projects where they are focusing on one or other of these specific ideas. And this might be within our institution or on the edges of it or totally outside or in other mutts or groups, but it's going on. And of course, it's not that there's one right way, and that's just the most important thing. There's not one right system that has to be followed. All of these directions to go in or systems, they can be useful if Krishna consciousness is applied properly. And each of them can be corrupted if we're not careful also. But beyond all of these different external paths, the mood in which we go about fulfilling these missions is the culture that we're creating. And that is always supposed to characterize Vaishnavism. Even more than the philosophy that we espouse, culture is revealed by the feeling that people have entering into a community or organization. Do you feel cared for, welcomed, transformed? If so, then that's the culture. Or do you feel ignored, uncared for, or judged? Then, in spite of noble mission and precepts, then that's the culture there. And that will either drive people away or attract them. People join or stay or return to a community when its culture and values inspire them and they feel welcome. And the tragedy of a culture not reflecting an organization's values is that members may eventually even doubt the organization's vision of fulfilling its mission, that it's just not capable. So, there are many organizational studies, and they all affirm again and again that a strong culture, it will increase the morale and increase the happiness and increase the productivity, whereas cultures of expedience, where one simply focuses on one's mission at the expense of one's values, they're bound to fail. And so many studies have been done, and they know this. This is just the way it works. It's a material truth. Or if they don't work, at least they don't work well. Or they may even morph into something that no longer represents its original mission. So personally, I just think it's worthwhile. It's essential, actually, to become more aware of how we are developing our culture. It is an essential part of unfolding any mission or any organization. And we can learn, even from many, many professional mundane studies, to understand cultural development. These things are relevant to our society. We have our very high philosophy and mission, but our institution and its cultural development, it's really not so much different from any other. And we can learn from studies that have been done what kind of organizational culture is appreciated and respected in the world today. At least we should be able to line up with those expectations. And of course, it's a gigantic topic. But, in brief, the culture of an organization is the culmination of its core values and beliefs, and its practices, and its procedures, and its expectations, and the rules and policies, and the leadership style, and the social order and attitude of those within it. The culture is what permeates all aspects, like the sum of all the things that make us what we are, our unique identity and personality. Like when people think of us, certain attributes automatically come to mind. And I don't know, maybe it's a sidetrack, thinking of mundane studies and things, but I recently read an article that I found it very interesting and relevant to help understand different types of organizational culture. So I will digress a little. These are not high spiritual topics, but just to share some of those things that I read about that we can compare. We can look at, well, where do we stand? Where does our culture fit in? Very broadly speaking, most experts in organizational culture would agree that there are 4 kind of broad culture types, which they'd break down to be a create culture, a collaborative culture, a control culture, or a compete culture. The 4 C's. So the create or creative culture, also referred to as an adhocracy culture. That would be, being in that kind of culture that it's dynamic and entrepreneurial, it's innovative, envisioning the future. There's a lot of freedom of thought and action and experimentation, and not afraid of risk or uncertainty, and kind of decentralized leadership, and a lot of individual initiative in organic decision making. So that's kind of one culture that's identified. Then there's a collaborate, which is also called the clan culture, and that's more people orientated, more friendly. Building teams, doing things together, commitment, empowerment, engagement, and collective wisdom. There's long-lasting partnerships and relationships, and in that culture, it's a little wary of conflict. And then the third type of the control culture is also known as a hierarchy culture. That is process-oriented, structured, rules, clear organizers and administrators, and they're invested in consistency and reliability and processes and routines and efficiency, and usually somewhat conservative, cautious, problem solvers. And then you have the market culture, or compete. That's kind of the world we live in, which is results-oriented and competitive and fast-moving and play to win and achieving goals and getting things done. And leaders are hard-driving and commanding and demanding. And, it's just interesting. These cultures they're generally consciously created. And none of these are right or wrong. It just depends on the goals of the organization. And one may work better in one organization than another. But of course, there will be elements of each that are, flow into the different cultures. It's not that structured. But usually one is predominant. And looking, where are we? In the early days of ISKCON, we might have a little more features of, I'd say, the creative and collaborative culture. And perhaps over time, more elements of the control and compete features coming to the fore. But anyway, the good news is that culture is not carved in stone, and being aware of the current culture can help to guide us to a different type of culture that may bring greater positive change. I think these are things that we need to think about. If I was a GBC, I'd certainly be exploring all of these things. Anyway, but organizational culture, it's observable. If the culture is healthy, you can see it. It's uplifting and functional, and you'll find that the members are happy in their work, and colleagues interact with each other, leaders interact with their workers, and there's an openness to change and new ideas. People speak up and share ideas or feedback willingly. And if there's an unhealthy culture, it will be visible. It will be kind of demoralizing, somewhat dysfunctional. You'll see dissatisfaction, even visibly toxic. So if not given proper attention, culture can certainly deteriorate. And cultures that don't do this, don't give proper time to think, who do not allow for continuous learning, they often wind up becoming stale or just mired in group think. And studies show that nowadays, especially younger generations, they only want to engage in a culture where personal satisfaction and fulfillment are paramount, where genuine relationships are possible, where authenticity and balance are something people are striving for. And the most desirable qualities people looking for in a culture, they've been clearly defined. It's been really studied that people want to be in a place where they have a sense of belonging, where there's a focus on well-being, on connectedness, inclusivity, teamwork, transparency, respect for others, trust, dedication to growth and development, openness to change and evolution, and consistency. You know, this is what people, ordinary, mundane folks, are looking for nowadays, even, you know, just in the workplace. And, you know, for this reason, nowadays leaders have to be much more intentional and proactive in fostering a positive culture that will be appealing to future generations. And I think all of these points are relevant to ISKCON's cultural growth. We may think, you know, that we're above all the ordinary folks and we're transcendental to all of it. We're above it all. But the fact is that if we want our society to grow, we are part of the world. This is what is going on in the world. These are the things people want. And if we don't provide them with their needs or their interests and their concerns, then we're not going to be attracting many people. So what to speak of keeping our devotees happy? So although this is not, you know, real direct Krishna conscious high-level talks, I believe it's relevant because I see now more than ever in all my years in ISKCON that many devotees are not happy and they're not satisfied with the institution. Of course, there's many reasons for that, but it's important to acknowledge this. So I am sorry to go on and on about more or less mundane topics, but just see these are the expectations out in the world. You know, this is what people want. You know, can we deliver it? It's quite a list, you know. And what culture do we have? And what are we aiming for? Are we even aiming? Or is it just, you know, flowing in various directions, you know? And okay, of course, when we speak of culture, we generally speak in terms of establishing Vedic culture. But there are vastly varying views on exactly what that means. But in any case, however you view, you know, whatever your idea of Vedic culture is, it is for sure, it does come under the category of hierarchy culture. You know, we can't deny that the Vedic teachings, they explain everything, even the universe, in hierarchical terms. However, we should be very aware how tyrannical some hierarchical cultures have become. I mean, we see here in India, somehow they've held on to some perverted ideas of remnants of Vedic culture, which has emphasized the hierarchical aspect, and that, you know, devolved into this caste system, which is just seen as one of the most brutal, stifling, unfair cultures in the world. You know, so for many in modern times, you know, hierarchy is almost a dirty word, you know. Because of so much abuse of power, many people naturally, they're naturally wary of any sort of hierarchy. But it is just there in the world. It can't be avoided. There is a natural hierarchies everywhere. It's natural that parents are going to raise their children, and the mother's going to decide what the child eats, not the child. And at school, it's natural that the teachers are going to teach the students, and the doctors are going to treat their patients. So, in every way, it's kind of there is hierarchy. It does naturally occur always and everywhere, But it's important, to have a hierarchical system, or to promote, if we want to promote one, that it's exemplary, that it's appealing, and it's effective. And these are things that people will want to see if we're going to promote such culture. So, well, one thing that it's important to understand, that even mundane academics, they accept that there are two types of hierarchy. One is positive and one is negative. So the positive one is called a growth hierarchy. And this type, it helps people. It helps people actualize their potential. And an environment is created where people find meaning and purpose and identity and are inspired to be and to do their best. That leaders inspire, influence, and persuade others to help them grow. So this is an effective and sustainable type of hierarchy. And the second type that is not positive, it's called a dominator hierarchy, where those in higher roles dominate those in lower roles. And force and coercion and manipulation are tactics that are used. And dominator hierarchies are usually led by people who make weak choices and use some type of force to get their way, even though force is evidence of weakness, not strength. It's tactical, and it's evidence that people are a means to an end, and not the end. It's really the opposite of caring. So in the long run, it's not sustainable. And, for sure, a Vedic culture, or perhaps we should say Varnashram culture, or specifically Daivi Varnashram culture, is meant to be the positive growth type of hierarchy. As Srila Prabhupada said, many, many quotes where he's clearly explained that Varnashram is not for artificial domination of one division over another. Rather, it's a system where the parts all work together independently in a spirit of service to each other to ultimately enable one to realize the absolute truth. But apart from this, what is even more important is that there's not just hierarchy, there is also equality of all life. There are two realities in the world, even in the mundane world, and also you'll see it clearly in the Bhagavad Gita. There is hierarchy and there is equality. And there is often tension between them. And basically, the tension between hierarchy and equality is the basis of most political tension from time immemorial. I've got some announcements going by. And in a spiritual movement, obviously there's this hierarchy of gurus and disciples, leaders and followers. There's a social hierarchy, and that's important. But at the same time, Krishna emphasizes equality. Pandita Samadarshana. The wise see all equally. Yoga is defined as equality. Equality is a big thing in the Bhagavad Gita. And equality is of greater importance because it's the eternal aspect based on the soul. And the hierarchy is temporary, based on the body. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that one who's truly in goodness, sarva bhuteshu, he sees the same spiritual nature in all living beings. Whereas if one is in passion, they only see the difference. Men, women, different countries, different religions. That is what's important to them. So in a spiritual movement, if I see hierarchy as more important than equality, that means I'm not truly a spiritual person or leader. True spiritualist sees equality as most important. And if you get a spiritual leader who sees difference as more than equality, that is a problem. And unfortunately, many of the religious people of the world, they tend to get infatuated with hierarchy, you know. And of course, there has to be proper organization and work done accordingly to one's nature. But as soon as an organization starts getting overly invested in all this, you know, human stuff, that's a real challenge for any spiritual movement to remain truly spiritual. In any organization or cultural, you know, someone will naturally have power over someone else, but as we have seen, that can corrupt people if we're not careful. And ironically, it is the people who really understand that I'm not better than anyone that are actually qualified to take higher positions in a hierarchy. And people who exploit an external position, such as, you know, a Brahmin or a sannyasi, thinking that they're better than other people, are actually unqualified. So, you know, spiritual society, it begins to degenerate into a religious society when people in the higher positions begin to see themselves as better than everyone else. So, you know, we can never be too careful about this. As many great spiritual causes, they begin with all these noble intentions, but they can just devolve into a mundane religious organization, and possibly further into just a business venture, or even worse, a racket. You know, so these are things that we would never, you know, joining ISKCON in the early days, we really opposed to this kind of mundane religious organization concept, you know. No, we're something else. So I think it's very important to understand that in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, hierarchy is second to equality. It's the foundation of our philosophy. It lies in understanding that we are all eternal spiritual beings, and we're encased within this physical body, you know, with specific propensities and desires. But in a truly Gaudiya Vaishnava culture, the eternal aspect is always going to outweigh, or, you know, it's going to weigh more strongly than the temporary. So thus our Krishna consciousness movement, it must emphasize more the transcendental nature of the soul. and our relationship with the Supreme Soul, rather than our temporary role in this world. Doesn't mean we don't do our temporary role and do it well, but it is secondary. And if we create a culture which emulates this kind of understanding, this could be deeply appreciated in the world today. You know, there's just endless fighting over the temporary designations of the world. We don't want to be the same as the outside world. We're supposed to have the answers. So if the environment is indeed focused on spiritual equality, then what will naturally evolve is a culture of respect. And that is attractive. That will attract people. I mean, Gaudiya Vaishnava culture is unique in that Mahaprabhu brought a philosophy that is radically inclusive, radically broad-minded and compassionate and loving. And thus, as we attempt to unfold a Krishna-conscious culture, it's essential that we firmly embrace and prioritize these most unique characteristics of Mahaprabhu's mission. And regardless of whether you live in an ashram or you're working in the world or you're on the farm or you're preaching, there are certain specific qualities that must be present if it's to truly represent the mission of Mahaprabhu. And it just has to express a culture of respect. And, you know, in a culture of respect, you will find gratitude and appreciation and a spirit of service. It will be visible and it will be felt. And even if we just theoretically understand these things and want to go in this direction, that will be positive. That will be a positive environment. But of course this is not something you can legislate. It is the natural result of actual spiritual progress, that our vision changes when we see the soul, really. We naturally, if we're looking like that, if we're seeing that Krishna is there in the heart, naturally we would become respectful and caring and humble people. So, I have to take a drink. 1 minute. So, some might say, yes, okay, we should be like this. And surely there are many devotees and many projects where you do find these nice qualities manifesting. But in many of us and in many places, we don't find it. You know, many of us are fighting. Many of us do not respect each other. And, you know, why is this? What do we do about it? And of course, there's so much that could be said about that. But of course, the most obvious is a lack of pure chanting and sadhana. So our vision is not changing. But one significant problem that I've seen is that we all know as devotees we're supposed to be respectful. Yet sometimes being respectful is tied closely to hierarchy only, and not genuine spiritual appreciation. In other words, we tend to dole out respect only according to a person's rank. Oh, you're a Prabhupada disciple. Oh, you're a sannyasi. I should respect you. But then I may just ignore or disrespect everyone else. And that is not a culture of respect. when hierarchy and equality are not in balance, we get a lopsided presentation of respect, which can be quite destructive rather than a healthy culture. You see, this attitude is very prevalent in India. It's even given a name by, I saw it in a book written about work cultures. They called what goes on in India the kiss up and kick down method of management. And it means that we bow to the one above, but then you push the person beneath you down. So even the idea of a culture of respect, it can become weaponized, and that is not attractive, you know. And I have experienced this many times in our society. You know, someone, maybe they're like, you're in a temple and maybe they're pushing and they're rude or something, and then they find out, oh, you're a Prabhupada disciple. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that you're a Srila Prabhupada disciple. And then they become all nice and bowy, and I'm like, what? You know, so if I'm not a Prabhupada disciple, then you could push and shove me, and, you know, it's just like, that's ridiculous. This is not genuine. You know, I've had so many, you know, I could tell many times. You know, one time I booked a room in one of the temples in India. I booked a guest house room, and when I arrived there, they were really not accommodating, and they were not paying attention. They were not giving me the room, and time was really going by, and oh, just wait, it's prasadam time, and it was really awful, and I was getting upset. And then suddenly one senior person came in who has some position, and he saw me, you know, and he knows I'm a Prabhupada disciple, you know, so he goes, oh, Mataji, how are you? And I said, well, I would be okay if I could just get my room. And so he goes, oh, hey, he, you know, snaps his fingers, and everybody starts scrambling, and suddenly there's a key, and the person's taking, oh, Mataji, come to your room. And I was just, oh, gosh, this is not the way, this is not right, you know. And then the same place I came at another time with my husband. And of course, he's a bit known, Harisori Prabhu. And, you know, so they like rolled out the red carpet and brought us Mahaprasadam. And my husband was like saying, oh, there's such sweet devotees here. And I was like, you have no idea. Try being a nobody and see how you get treated, you know. And yeah, there's one famous quote, how does it? You can tell a man's character by how he treats those he has nothing to gain from. You know, so we see this. And so often I see that sometimes, you know, of course, as a Prabhupada disciple, I just don't even want to be, because, you know, naturally you're supposed to, there is a normal etiquette and all, that you give a garland and, you know, things are, but then, you know, I might be standing next to somebody that, you know, has been a Sankirtan devotee, slugging their guts out for 40 years, and nobody knows who they are, and he's just ignored, you know. And of course, you know, we have etiquette, but, you know, we have to be careful that we actually see people, see the qualities and the characteristics, that it's genuine. It's not just about where you're placed in the hierarchy. That is not a genuine form of respect. You know, so when things get too lopsided like that, and honor, it gets doled out in strange ways, so much to one and so little to others, you know, that kind of lopsided. You know, you're like, some people, like sannyasis or gurus, are, you know, treated like God, and others are treated, you know, just like, you know, schmucks. And I've experienced it many times, you know. And, so, I mean, we have to be careful that we don't just create our own caste system. And because this lopsided kind of respect, it's far away from a truly spiritual culture. And it's totally out of step with what people in the world want nowadays, what they want to see in people who are supposed to be spiritual people. If we want to truly represent Mahaprabhu's mission, then the culture must visibly display his spirit of magnanimity and mercy and compassion and broad-mindedness and inclusiveness and kindness to all. That's Mahaprabhu. That's what he came to give. And there's 3 essential aspects to Mahaprabhu's mission that they just have to be present. Or at least there has to be some sincere efforts to manifest them. And it's not complicated. It boils down to 3 things: Jivadoya, Vaishnav Seva, Namruchi. Jivadoya, kindness to all souls. Vaishnav Seva, humble service to the devotees. And Namruchi, a dedication to pure chanting the holy names. And that's the culture we want to develop. Ultimately, Prabhupada, I saw a quote just recently, Prabhupada says it the best. He says, a Vedic society is based on the principle of love between husband and wife, father and son, the king and citizens, and so on. And civilization must be founded on love, not law. By law, you cannot make a person love you. First, he must love you. Then he will gladly follow your law. Modern civilization lacks this basis of love, so everything is superficial and false. But if devotion to Krishna is made the basic principle, then people will be happy. Isn't that a beautiful quote, Prabhupada? And of course, it's so easy to say all these things, to shoot my mouth off. It should be like this, it should be like that. So many shoulds, should. So much talk, so many words. Maybe it's a waste of time to go on and on about this. Will it help? I don't know. And of course, this is nothing new. Whatever I'm saying is nothing new. Many devotees speak about these topics and have written books about such, many of these things, especially like Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He has wonderful books about culture and community. So much has been said. It's nothing new here. But repetition, I guess, is good. Prabhupada was always repeating, because we're so forgetful, so covered over. And it's always good to keep hearing, keep looking at things from different angles. And at least if we talk about it, maybe we can increase our awareness of what we should be trying for. And it's so easy to say it should be like this, but to actually manifest that, how do we institute cultural change? That is a very difficult and a deep topic. But it is said that culture change almost never happens without a conscious effort for it. And there are many, many studies that affirm that in a successful organization, the leader helps define the organization's values and then focuses on ensuring that those values become part of the organization's daily culture through education, encouragement, even stressing adherence to the organization's core values more than stressing its productivity, And it's definitely possible. I mean, I have seen examples of this being very successfully done. in Radha Swami's projects and other places, but just as an example, as a leader, he has really prioritized the development of its culture by focusing on and repeating again and again and again to its members that the foundational principles of Vaishnavism, that one must be the servant to the servant to the servant. One must be the servant to the servant to the servant. And I personally saw the effectiveness of this. I was recently had a hip replacement at the Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai, and I saw how that culture had been, drummed into everyone there, devotees and not devotees, anyone that works there. Every day they stand in front of Srila Prabhupada and they help the people focus. We're here to serve the body, the mind, and the soul of each person that comes to us, and you can feel it. You could feel it in the atmosphere. It's very impressive. But in places where we don't see that kind of guidance from leadership, well, then what? What do we do if the leaders don't take an interest in shaping the culture in a positive way? And that's often the case. And there are certainly many devotees who are unhappy with the ISKCON culture where they may be living, and who feel we have a long way to go to creating an ideal culture, or have even given up the idea that it's possible. But there is always hope. For sure, criticizing, complaining, and being angry or complacent, it's not going to help. We always have choices. Where to serve, who to associate with, seeking out those who are aspiring in this direction in a positive way. If we want that, Krishna will help. And we can always work individually. We work within our circle of influence. Aspire to create a proper Vaishnava culture just within our own home, friends, community. There's always a way to cultivate change, at least individually and internally. And really the society is just made up of individuals. So when individuals change, when we, each of us, rise out of Kanistha consciousness, eventually the culture in the group changes. So ISKCON is just the sum total of its parts. If we change, the society will change. So, change, it's not easy, individually or collectively, because it's dependent on actual spiritual realization, which arises from proper practice and dedication. And there's just no substitute for realized knowledge. We all know these things in theory, but when this knowledge goes from the head to the heart, then we will naturally become caring people, respectful people. Even if we're not at all perfect people, that's okay. And even if we're not spiritually advanced enough to act in this way, in a realized way, at least we can be humbled by that fact. If I was spiritually advanced, I could be so helpful in making this change that I would like to see. So at least knowing we should at least try, and without at least trying, then we also are part of the problem. And, because the simple fact is that to build a healthy culture, it's basically happens one loving exchange after another. They build up, and then things change. And, also we have to not expect too much from the organization. That just sets you up for disappointment. Organizations are always going to be a mixed bag, but we very much need what Srila Prabhupada spent his life creating. We very much need this in order to spread Lord Chaitanya's mission. So we just have to keep trying. It's all, it's all too easy to get discouraged. At sometimes it may feel, oh, we just have such a long way to go, personally and institutionally, to really manifest an ideal Vaishnava culture. But we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, as, this is something that's going to unfold over generations. And a huge amount of groundwork has been done in the last 50 years. It's important to acknowledge and appreciate the progress. Sometimes we just see how far we have to go, but we don't recognize how far we've really come. So, what we're trying to do, it hasn't been done before. It's the first International Gaudiya Vaishnava Society. It's challenging. There will be so much in the future for generations to do. But we just have to keep trying and keep the faith in Srila Prabhupada's vision. A few years ago, a man who was a high-ranking United Nations official happened to visit Mayapur. And my husband showed him around a bit and told him if he really wanted to get the feel of the community here, he should go to Mangalarti. And surprisingly, the man did it. So after Mangalarti, they give the announcements, and they said, let us welcome this man who's come from the UN. He's a very highly placed person, a very important man in the United Nations. And let's give him big Haribol. And, so everyone, Haribol. And then surprisingly, the man stood up and he asked if he could take the microphone and say something. It was kind of really surprising. What's he going to say? And he had, it was an emotional voice. And he said, you cannot imagine where I come from. In the kind of work I do, I am constantly dealing with different communities that are filled with prejudice and strife and fighting and wars and disagreements and confrontations. And it's our job to try to generate peace. And this is a very difficult task. And now somehow or another, I've arrived here, out in the middle of this remote area, and I am absolutely overwhelmed to see people here of every color, from many different nations, all different ages, coming together at this early hour of the morning and singing and dancing joyously together. He said, it is wonderful. He said, it's been an overwhelming experience to see truly united nations here. And it seems that you've found some secret formula of success. It was so beautiful, to hear how someone from a very different world perceived what we just take for granted every day. And so, yes, there is much work to do, and we just have to keep trying, and generation after generation, to create a culture which emulates Mahaprabhu's most merciful mission of divine love. Hare Krishna.